in my 1920s, a lot happier with life, really. And then I probably had 2-3 of the worst years of my life. Found out my mum had a brain tumour, and then 6 months later, lost my daughter in a tragic accident. She was just about 7 months old. It's dark and lonely, and you can't really see anything else. For probably 2 years, I felt like I didn't remember anything. I wasn't resilient in any way, shape or form, and I think it was hard because I was also the person other people were looking to keep them. I felt often like I was trying to hold a lot of it together. I wanted to try and find ways to help people like that, give them opportunities that they perhaps didn't always have to manage their stress and well-being. I actually used what I was doing for others to help me. Every time I did something and learned, I tried to apply it. I think it was an essential part of me coping. Learn to love yourself and give yourself a break. The one person that's with you all your life is you, and if you're very harsh on yourself at all points, it's really difficult. You can't give people something from an empty cup. If you've got nothing left, then there's nothing else to give.
Hello, I'm Ed, and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast series, Tackling It Together, brought to you by Little Blackbird, where we will be having open, honest and important conversations with some inspirational guests. Welcome back to the episode of Tackling It Together, a Little Blackbird podcast, and we're back at Chester Rugby Club with James Duckers, aka Duckers.
Yep.
Prior to the podcast starting, we spotted the Chester Rugby Union Football Annual. We went through it. You had 35 caps.
35 mighty caps.
And I had a mere 18 for the first team.
But all tremendous.
But identified that we played in the same season.
We did. And
we've just told a tale about us dressed as Mexicans.
Yes. Long forgotten and just been relived.
What a night that was.
Yeah.
So viewers, listeners, you're probably thinking, yes, the answer is yes, we've got another rugby player.
Yeah.
But again, a rugby player that's going to give us a different perspective today, an honest perspective, which is what we're all about. And this is about real people telling real stories and sharing real perspectives.
Yeah.
So firstly, how's life? How's things?
It's good. Well, thanks for asking me on. I've seen the podcasts and I think they're really good. And from my side of stuff, I think when you asked, I was like, yeah, I want to do it. But yeah, I'm good. Really good place at the moment. Things are working well. Happy at the moment, which is a nice place to be.
Rugby boots, done?
Well hidden,
burnt.
Long time ago. Yeah, it's been a long few seasons since I've played, but lots of other passions now, other things to do with my time.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you now. So professionally, flying. You've been really busy.
Yes.
Loads of stuff going on in the Chester area. Tell us a little bit about your role and what you've been doing.
Well, yeah, at the moment, so I work in the NHS. I actually work in a GP practice in the Ellesmere Port area, and I'm the commercial director for the practice, and basically lead the practice. Unfortunately, it had a bit of a bad time, struggling in terms of reputation, and so we've been trying to work on that and build, and it's going really well. Yeah, currently sort of growing and developing and looking at other opportunities, so it's good. And we've also created like a community interest arm of it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, to try and do some preventative work in the community, try and sort of outreach into that community instead of it all being very reactive medicine. So it's interesting. I love it. It's the best job I've ever had. So
going back, when I did ask you, you said, yes, I'll come and do it.
Yeah.
Have a message. Why? Why did you say yes?
I think it's massively important. Obviously, we'll talk about my journey, but men talking about what they've been through is massively important to me. From a health perspective, working in health for 20 odd years now and seeing how that impacts people, but also as a person and family and friends, and I just know how important it is to break the taboo of not talking about things. So as soon as you offered it up, it was something that I felt like I really want to do that.
And we spoke a little bit about the rugby culture before. So we played together for years.
Yeah.
But never really had those deep and meaningful conversations. No. What was it about that time when we played rugby that maybe prevented those deep and meaningful conversations?
I just think a lot of people don't want to be deep all the time, and it's having that right time and opportunity. And I felt at rugby, it was my opportunity to go and play rugby, enjoy myself, let everything off my shoulders, not necessarily get into sort of what was going on in the background or any of that sort of deep feelings. But I felt like it was my out. It was my opportunity to go and relieve stress rather than analyze it. I think that's how I felt, and I just don't, we said, a lot of it's to do with you're just there, you're having a crack, you go out, you play. There's not always that time to sit and just ask each other, everything all right at home, or it's a different atmosphere. I felt when I was there.
It was the therapy, wasn't it? I always refer to rugby was my therapy.
Yeah.
Looking back. However, it was also a blocker because the game was the therapy, the contact, the vent and the emotion. But the amount of time you'd spend on a bus sitting next to someone, the amount of time you'd sit in the changing room, there was real opportunities to...
I think I've always been, and I'm quite a sociable person, but I'm quite antisocial. And for me, the rugby side of stuff was quite intense. The game itself was what I was there to do, and so I often found when I was travelling and stuff, it was a lot about me preparing for the game and what I was, it wasn't, I didn't always see it, and now I look back I think perhaps it's wasted, but I didn't always look at it as a chance to sit with my mates. I thought about it as a chance to prepare for the game that was coming. I took it all very seriously all the way through. So I didn't always see it as, and like I say, I look back and I think you had a lot of good people around you, and you didn't meet with them outside and stuff because I was really focused on that, like, this is what I want to do. I want to do the best I can. And so, it was, I think I had quite a different experience at the end to what I think I would like if I'd have taken it more enjoyable in some ways, if that makes sense.
But rugby was a career path for you as a child.
Yeah.
That was something you wanted to be a rugby player.
Yeah.
You were always very focused when you played.
Yes.
Injuries got in the way, which we'll tap into.
Yeah.
So when you look back at that, the rugby was a career plan for you.
And even when I knew it wasn't going to be a career, I couldn't unpick the mentality of it. I used to talk about, people used to say to me about going out for drinks on a Friday night well after I'd finished any sort of career aspirations, and I couldn't. They were like, oh, it's just Friday night, come out for a drink. And I was like, I'm playing tomorrow. Well, it's only Anselmians or it's only whoever. And I couldn't change that mentality I had. And like I say, I look back sometimes and think, oh God, why wasn't I just enjoying it and seeing the lads and chatting? So you look back sometimes and think, well, What could have been different?
Apologies to any Anselmians fans out there. There's other clubs in the county, in the area. You said before about your role, and there's a real passion for health. I know now you're a big, like myself, a big ambassador for mental health, but tell me a little bit about where that passion for health came from.
Because of that interest in sport, I always thought the two were very linked. You know, I always, with the mentality of trying to be a sports person, you were always trying to be healthy. And when I wasn't going to be that, I went into sports development and sport, like management side, and actually found the pathway to the NHS quite easy. Because what I used to do in my roles was walking groups, and what I found from that was they were really therapeutic, you know, people being out and about and talking. So it became less of sport and traditional sport, and actually how do we be healthier? And then at that point, that's when I transitioned into the NHS, got my first role in that, and yeah, it sort of opened me up to the wider health thinking, you know, a lot less around I need to go and do this sport, and actually, you know, why aren't we going for walks, and why don't we have a social group, and the mental health. And I worked with a team that was a nutritionist, an emotional well-being practitioner, and myself, and that really opened me up, because it just used to sit there and we talk about what campaigns we do and what programs, and you talk about stuff, and the emotional well-being practitioner would throw a completely different slant on it, and you'd think, I didn't even think about that. You know, the fact that if we run a tennis group, you get in people who perhaps are socially isolated to come together. It was like, and I found that really interesting, and I think tied with my life experiences, I wanted to try and find ways to help people like that, give them opportunities that they perhaps didn't always have to manage their stress and well-being. So yeah, like I say, as soon as those doors opened and I went through them, it changed my outlook on everything. I looked at sport very differently, which is, you know, I thought it was quite liberating in some ways.
It sounds like there's a real connection there between you understanding more about yourself and your level of emotional intelligence. Yeah. I mean, at the time, it was a really difficult time. And so almost self-therapied myself. I don't think that is the word, but that is the word I'm going to use. But, you know, I actually used what I was doing for others to help me. You know, working out coping strategies, how to understand what emotional resilience was. When I was telling people about how to do it, I think what I was actually doing was learning and thinking to myself, I should be doing that. I should be doing that. And I think that's probably why it became such a passion, because it was more than just pulling together a program and sitting and spitting out words. It was a bit more like I was going, oh yeah, I need to do that. I think I should be doing that. So I found it very fulfilling, I think, in that way. Working on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And everything you did in those sort of health and well-being programs, and, you know, I delivered a parenting program called Strengthening Families. And at the time, again, I'd gone through some really big loss, and I was talking to these parents and helping them, and it helped, and it helped me understand what was going on for me. And like I say, I picked some bits out and really thought, well, you know, even just sitting with the nutritional person who was talking about healthy cooking, you know, you go in, I'll try that. I should try that. And everything that we did feel like you were self-improving and helping yourself sort of strengthen, really.
You said there you were helping others, but do you think, looking back now, well, we'll try and get into those challenging moments. Didn't just help you, but it tried and enabled you to heal a little bit.
Oh, without doubt. Without doubt. Like I say, you know, whatever the terminology was, it definitely was me almost doing therapy with myself. You know, every time I did something and learnt, I tried to apply it. And I think it was oh well, I've learned that, I'll use it. But in reality, I think it was an essential part of me coping. It was me thinking, I really do need to do something to help manage my mental health. And, you know, you look back and think, if I hadn't done that, would I have the same sort of resilience? You know, but it definitely helped. Definitely became a tool. And because you're helping, it feels good. It felt good to be helping people and helping families and communities and doing nice activities and running an Olympics and all that sort of stuff. But to see the family interactions and the happiness was a massive thing. You come back very fulfilled, you know. For me, I think it just fitted.
Yeah, and that ability to help and give back to others. I mean, what impact does that have on you and your roles as a father, as a husband, all those multiple roles that you have? What impact does that have?
I think that's who I've always been. I think that's a core thing of me. I've always been a giver in a lot of ways like that. But it definitely impacted it. You know, once you're feeling better, you feel like you can come and give back. And I always talk to the staff I work with now, you can't give people something from an empty cup. If you've got nothing left, then there's nothing else to give. So I think coming back and feeling like you've done a great day's job, you've enjoyed it, you're quite fulfilled, then you can come back and feel like you can give back. And I think, so it was quite big and important for us at the time, I think, for me to be able to do that.
Brilliant. So if we do go back, and you've alluded to challenging times there in your journey, can you try and articulate some of those challenges that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, and I spoke to you before we started, didn't I? The one thing I wanted to sort of try and get over was that I think everyone goes through difficult times. Yeah. This is definitely not about me saying what a difficult life I've had. Yeah. But there have been parts of my life that have been really difficult. Growing up was the first big one. I had a very happy upbringing. I was a very happy child, but I was very overweight, and I struggled with that in terms of self-esteem. You know, people would take the mick, and I would say that I was often seen as a coward because I wasn't a fighter. So I didn't put people straight, or I didn't challenge it. And that's purely because I always remember what my dad said to me, which is, you know, you do not need to prove anything to anyone else. As long as you're happy with you, what does it matter if they think? He always just used to say to me, don't hit them, just smile and walk away. And that's sort of the mantra I took. But it was hard. It really was, being big. I talk to my lad now, you know, and if he's putting on a bit of weight, I'll talk to him about it, and I'll just say to him, it's so difficult if you are overweight and you struggle with it. Because, like I say, people used to call me names and all sorts, and you might smile it off, but in the background it hurt. So that was hard, and I carried that through most of my school life. And then got to, in my 1920s, a lot happier with life, really. And then I probably had 2-3 of the worst years of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, you referenced that when we were on a conversation.
Yeah.
We deliberately didn't talk too much, we just had a bit of a text conversation.
Yes.
You referred to that as the 3 worst years of your life.
Yeah. So I'd been doing very well. I was going back to the rugby side, pushing for a career in rugby. I was, at Sale Sharks. I'd been there for 3 years, looking for a professional contract with playing alongside those that were getting those contracts. And I was sat down and told basically, you're never going to get a contract here. And that, when it's your way out, so as a big lad, once I found I was good at something because of my weight, I used it and I thought, great. And it got me to somewhere where I thought I'd never get to. But then to get to a point where you've worked so hard for so many years to be just told flat out, there is no chance. It hurt. It destroyed me. And I had to rethink what the rest of my career would look like. And I went off to uni, and again I was settled, and then found out my mum had a brain tumour, and my mum and I super close, always were. So I found that out, and during that period I'd had my daughter, which was amazing. But tough, because we were going through that tough time with my mum. And so I lost my mum to a brain tumour, which was devastating. And then 6 months later, lost my daughter in a tragic accident. She was just about 7 months old. And it was,
Horrendous.
dark.
Yeah.
Dark, I think, is the way to describe it.
And how old were you then?
I was about 21, and you can't really describe what it feels like, but it's dark and lonely, and you can't really see anything else.
No. At that age as well, I mean, and thanks for sharing that, but
it's okay.
It's such a young age, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I wasn't resilient in any way, shape or form at the time, and I was a mess. And I think it was hard because I was also the person other people were looking to keep them. I was the strength.
Yeah.
And so they looked to me for reassurance, and it was so hard in that time to feel you had enough to reassure anyone else about. And everyone, and this is what I was saying, everyone was going through a tough time. Everyone in the family was living a different perspective of those losses. It was huge. I can only talk about my side, but I felt often like I was trying to hold a lot of it together, and it was it was some, like I say, really tough times. I remember, and it was very odd because I watched the last podcast you'd done, and I went to exactly the same car park.
Right, wow.
In Sandy Lane, that one of your guests had been to, and had almost the same moment down there. That's where I lived, in that area. And so I went down there in the pitch black and just sat, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And people talk about suicide, and when you get to a place where you don't really know how you're going to come out the other end, sometimes it feels like the only option. And I don't know what it was. I think it was a reflection on not letting anyone else down or whatever. But, I said to myself at the time, no, come on, you've got to be there. And I want to have a life. So, it was tough.
Bloody hell. You said then, I wasn't resilient. But knowing now what you know now as an older lad, what would you have needed? I mean, who was resilient at that age to go through that?
No, what? I don't think you are. I don't think you've had enough life experience to have been tested hard enough. What I will say is that going through the pressure that I felt at the likes of Sale and being under pressure constantly, I would say at least gave me a harder shell to deal with it.
Yeah.
That is one thing that I would say is, I think if I hadn't have been put in quite a lot of difficult positions, and then I was put through what I was, and I was in that same car park, I'm not sure how I would have managed it.
Right.
Yeah. When you look back, I don't think you can be resilient until you've been through.
Yeah.
But it's, we talk in health about learning to be resilient, and that is fine when you think, right, I'll do this, I'll be mindful, but when you're taken through a trauma like that, it takes you to another place.
You're talking about multiple traumas as well.
Yeah.
In a duration of time. And
yeah.
It's funny, we get asked a lot about, come and do resilience training, and exactly the same. And I agree. I think life would be a lot easier if you didn't have to go through shit to be resilient.
Yeah.
But it is part of the process.
Yeah, it is.
You can get as close to that light and come through it.
Yeah. And it gives you a different outlook on life. I know people talk about that, but it 100% did. But for probably 2 years, I felt like I didn't remember anything. It was almost like autopilot. I managed to pass my degree in the year after my daughter died, and I don't know how I did it. I don't know mentally how I did it. I don't know. And, I think back now, and it's hard to think about, because I don't know whether it shut down or what, but like I say, this period, a couple of years really, where I can barely remember anything.
So can you recall how that trauma manifested in your behaviour a couple of years after that? What was life like?
I think like everything.
Just a blur.
Yeah, a blur, but you try, and I've always tried to put that happy face on. So it was always try and keep it upbeat and everything, and ignore anything that's bad, and try and focus on the positives and do all that. But I think like everyone, I was emotionally worn out. So I'm not sure I responded very well to things, and I just, I was very isolated, closed ranks, kept everything close to me. Just didn't enjoy life. Just tried to prove everyone that I could get through it, and that was about it. But yeah.
Hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, please engage with us on whatever platform you're listening. Leave us a review, rate the show, subscribe, a comment. Please engage with us so that we can keep these podcasts as on point as possible and keep you happy. Take care, all the best, keep smiling. And now, a good few years on, not that you're old, but we both had long paper rounds.
Yeah.
When things wobble now,
yeah,
when life gets a bit tough, how do you approach it differently, being on the back of that trauma?
Completely differently. I suppose the view now for me and the family is, I always think nothing can be as bad as that. Nothing can take me to that place. So, if something happens or you fall out or whatever, we'll look and think, it'll never be as bad as what I've been through. We can get through this, I can get through this, and it makes things feel not so scary, I think.
And having that experience of what you've went through, what does that give you when you're in a room with families or young people or adults and you're trying to help them come to terms with traumatic times?
I think it's really hard. Like we said, there's nothing like lived experience, and if people are going through, they'll do it their way. The one thing I always talk to them about is finding people to share it with. It's so important. Just being able to open up, whether you've got one close friend or whether you've got a group of friends or whatever it is, but actually, being willing to talk about it, and myself, lots of bad things happen afterwards. I've been through cancer scares with, family members since, but we were opened up. And I share that when I talk to other people who are going through that is, trying to carry it on your own is the hardest and probably the worst thing. You think, I don't want to offload my problems on everyone else, but actually what those people want to do is help. And that's the one thing. So, I've always tried to be very open. I went years after all of this, I went back to therapy out of choice, not because I felt like I couldn't cope, because I'd coped for years, but because I wanted to go and open up again. And stuff like that I found really helpful for me.
What type of therapy? The only reason I say is I embarked on compassion therapy.
Okay.
When I got out of hospital with my little lad had a rough start to life, and that was a game changer around how you go into drive or threat, and then you start to new brain weave a bit of compassion in there. It just gives you a totally different. It doesn't make it all better. It doesn't put a nice beautiful bow on it, but you gain a bit of understanding. You can reflect a little bit. Yeah,
definitely. I went to but I went to counselling because I think I just wanted to talk. I wanted to talk, and almost without judgment. Not that anyone was judging, but I wanted to go to someone that didn't know anything about me and just be able to say, this is how I feel. This is exactly, and this is, and I'll be honest, when I went, the conversations weren't always what I thought they would be. I thought I would go and talk about trauma, and very often it wasn't. And I don't know whether that's because I still wasn't ready, or whether I'd managed to understand where I was at in the journey. But yeah, it was, like I say, it was really beneficial for me.
Yeah, we had Joe Leask on a conversation, a podcast a few months ago, and he said that. He said all we did was talk. Like the power of offloading it and externalising what's been in there for a long period of time.
Yeah. And like I say, I think when you do decide to do something like that, you go in with a preconceived idea of probably what you're going to end up talking about. And like I say, I was quite shocked about what I did talk about and the things that really had eaten away at me. And yeah, like I say, quite eye-opening.
You said before about body image and, being a big lad and playing rugby. We do a programme at the Rugby Club, the Head Guard programme, where we do wellbeing work with the kids on the pitch.
Yeah.
And the constant thing that we get asked for teens is around body image. Sessions on body images, what it is, and kind of finding peace with whatever your size is. And it sounds like that's a little bit similar to the battle that you had early on in life.
Yeah.
What needs to be different?
I'm not sure. I think I think part of it is a bit of a rite of passage. I don't think anyone is happy with their body as they grow up. You know, there's always things, isn't it? You know, and even as you get older, I want my hair back, and you know, you want a lot of that.
How did you look back at the hair?
But there's a lot of that, and I know that I think always we need to be kinder. That's part of what needs to be put in. But I think even as a kid, even without people saying things to me, I wasn't happy with my size, you know. And yes, people telling you and reminding you you're big hurts and knocks you down. But without doubt, I didn't need to go out and be told by other people I was big to be unhappy that I was big. And so I think it's such a complex thing, especially with eating, because you know, it's, you know, you're growing up. I got the food that was provided to me, but then what made me want to go and snack on other stuff in the background? And like I say, I was very happy at home, so it wasn't I was doing it out of being upset or driven like that. I couldn't honestly tell you what it is, and I'm still not happy with my weight. I haven't ever been. I think as you get older, you become a little bit more willing to accept you for you. But as a kid, I think you're exceptionally harsh on yourself. You know, you look at others, don't you? And you're in groups and you look and you think, well, they're thin and they're tall and I'm not this and I'm not that. But I've always been a believer that I've always tried to be kind to others. And I think it can be hard. And I think social media, again, is another one, isn't it? Where, you know, the access the kids have now to social media, and, you know, my lad's constantly on the phone to someone, on his games and messaging, and, you know, if something happens between them, it's, well, you're this and you're that. So I think it's even worse now in that respect. But I think even if you removed all that and you asked everyone, are you happy with you? I'm not sure it would be oh yes, this is perfect. And I think that's hard. So trying to, I think any way we can make it better is better. But I think part of growing up is about people, like we've just talked about, becoming resilient and pushing themselves, isn't it? You know, I want to be better than what I think I am, and some of that isn't always negative. There can be some positivity to people being driven and thinking, do you know what, I'm going to do this, and achieving it and stuff like that. But definitely for me, it shouldn't be because someone else has told them, you know, or made them feel like that. I think if we could remove that, that would be a huge chunk.
Going through what you've gone through in life, those massive traumas, what's been your biggest learns that's come out from them?
Well, that's a massive question.
Almost, you're sitting down with your lad, and Sunday dinner, and you were chatting about it. On reflection now, looking back, thinking about that lad sitting in that car, contemplating those and negotiating those difficult thoughts, that young lad sitting on the bus and choosing not to communicate with people but just focus on the game, that young lad that's been told that your dream's over.
I think the biggest learn from me is that there's always something good around the corner. I think if I could, you know, and that's sort of what I held on to. You know, there were a lot of times where I got to a point with some of these things where I thought, where next? You know, maybe this is it, you know. I'm not going to play rugby professionally, so is that all I've got to give? And actually, you know, I went round the corner and found health and love my job, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I wouldn't trade it for a go back, but, you know, I wouldn't change what I do. And I think that's probably the biggest one I feel, is that if you stick the journey, there is other stuff that comes along. But I think the key thing is being willing to embrace that. You know, again, I've spoken to a lot of people that have been through these things, and I think there's this feeling that they have to not be happy. You know, they feel like it's almost an insult. You know, and I felt it for a couple of years. You know, after losing my mum and Caitlin, I felt guilty being happy. You almost feel like you shouldn't be happy. This has happened to you. Why are you happy? And you almost challenge yourself about it. And I think now it's easy to look back and think to yourself, you should have embraced those happy, good moments. And that's what I would pass back.
That's brilliant, that. If there is people watching this and listening to that, I know there'll be people that will resonate with that, find it difficult to lean into it or feel that they are not worthy to lean into that happiness. What advice would you give them? What's the first steps to try and, you said embrace it, but try and lean into that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's just accepting there is good coming and not pushing against it. But that is so easy to say and not so easy to do when you're struggling. It's so easy for someone else to say, don't worry, something good will come. But I think it's one of those where if you're going through that, you've got to try and not be so hard on yourself. So if you find yourself laughing at something or something good's happened and you feel nice inside, it's not then trying to beat it out of yourself and say to yourself, well, you shouldn't be that. But again, like I say, it's easy. I found the mind is one of the hardest things, because I think you want to do something, but your mind will do what it wants to do. And it's so hard. You know, people have said in the past, well, why don't they just come out and do this? And I think everyone would love to. I think if you asked someone, that's what I would love, to go out and see people and be happier. But the brain and the mind just leads it whichever way it goes. But what I would say is sometimes people think, I shouldn't be happy, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I think if you can try and look into yourself and think it's okay to do that, I think that's a massive thing.
And that comes down to those habitual limiting beliefs that people develop over a period of time, isn't it? I'm not good enough, and I've been told I'm not good enough, or that example, and you become entrenched in that. But we had a chat before we came on camera, and we talked about men in particular. Yeah. And we both shared stories about losing good people to suicide, and I suppose I'm wanting to get into what can people do to tackle those limiting beliefs and those negative beliefs. You said before about find one person, externalise that. It sounds through your journey, that young lad sitting on a bus, they wouldn't really talk too much to people, is very different to the fella that I'm seeing now that is prepared to be open. Yeah. So how do men in particular try and tackle those inner demons, those inner thoughts?
I think it is just about being willing to talk. And I don't even think it's always needing to talk deep. You know, I think if I'd have been that young lad sat on the coach, just willing to chat about what's been going on in life, you know, oh, I've done this at the weekend, I've done this at the weekend, I think that would have been great. So I don't think it's always about having to go and have, you know, a sit down like this and be yes, be open, but not always having to share everything that you don't want to share. But I think guys especially being willing to just talk, and if they feel like they want to share it. But we talked, there's still stigmas around men, and I think men, it's that habit, isn't it? Internal habit that they think, I shouldn't be this, or I don't want to show weakness, and I don't want to be vulnerable in front of anyone else, and it can be hard. I found it hard. I've broke down in tears as a 16 stone guy, and thought, what must my family and friends think of me looking like this? And actually, what I learned is, what they think is, you've been through a hell of a journey, and thank God you're going to let this get out with us. And again, it's easy to say, hard to do, but like you said, we both lost people that we know, and you just think, if only you were willing to let that out, or pick up the phone, or do something, or speak to someone, whoever you can. Like I say, for me, the counsellor was great, because I felt I could be completely vulnerable in a situation. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be a mate on the bus. It can be, your partner, your wife, whoever. But being willing to do it is quite a big thing.
That's a really good point, that, and I would agree with that from speaking to people quite a lot in the past. There is something about that person that doesn't know you, but they want to listen.
Yeah.
And they want to offer a perspective.
Yeah.
No judgment,
yeah.
They want to offer a perspective. So I suppose that is a bit of advice for people watching or listening, just leaning into that, trying that. And there's so many, I believe you can't dictate whether you're going to fall into a dark place. Life will sort that out. It will present those issues, but with all the technology, the hundreds of charities out there who, a text message, a QR code, that support is there, but it's that first act of reaching out, isn't it?
Definitely.
But I agree that there's something about speaking to that neutral person that doesn't know you, they're not connected. You can go back home, go to your sports club, just do what you normally do, but have that little thing where it's like that oxygen mask, that self-care, where I'm just going to put it on and try and figure it out. Definitely.
Wherever you are the most comfortable to do it, I think that's the key to doing it. It's finding, some people are comfortable with their partners and family. Some people are really open with their friends, and some who aren't. Then there are other ways that aren't always, that don't compromise how you feel about yourself.
I'm really interested for you as a dad with your young lad. How old is he?
13.
13.
Yeah.
So I get asked to do a lot of work around masculinity. There's certain people on YouTube that throw a lot of views and opinions out there, but with masculinity and with your level of emotional intelligence now and all the learning that you've gone through, and how do you put that into your role as a parent with your 13-year-old lad?
I'm always open with him and say to him, I do a lot of talking, so I will go and sit with him and ask him how he is and how he's feeling, and tell him it's okay to tell me if he's not happy, even if it's me. I say to him, if I've done something to annoy you, just tell me, I'll still be here, but I just want to know, and try and open those doors. So I find that, I think unfortunately as parents, I'm sure you do the same age, you overthink. I'm an overthinker, and I'll be thinking, he was quiet. Why is he quiet? Is it this? Is it that? And I'll go up and I'll ask him, and I say to him, don't bottle anything in, and then he'll just turn around to me and say, I'm just tired. You just go, oh, all right then, and off you toddle, but I like to think that he feels he can say whatever he feels.
Yeah.
And that to me is the key. In terms of him, you know, I don't ever say to him, you know, that sort of old view, which was, you know, you're a lad, don't cry, you know, if you know, come on, just get on with it. None of that. I'm very open with him and say, look, probably too much. He'd probably say that. He'd probably say, oh, you're forever asking me if I'm all right. And, you know, he's been through a lot in his life. And so for him, I just always check in. But, yeah.
So, thanks for being so open and honest. I haven't prepped this with you, I don't think, but at the end of all these conversations, we always ask our guests to give their little blackbird worm of wisdom.
Wow.
Which is advice.
Yeah.
To anyone that might be watching this, listening to this, that could resonate with your story. So what would be your little blackbird worm of wisdom, James?
I think for me, it would be learn to love yourself and give yourself a break. That would be it. You know, the one person that's with you all your life is you. And if you're very harsh on yourself at all points, it's really difficult. And you've just got to sometimes say it's okay to be upset, happy, sad, whichever. But to me, that's it.
Mate, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed tackling it together. Brought to you by Little Blackbird. If you did, then please hit the subscribe button. Give us a follow on our socials. Little Blackbird Limited. Also, please give us a like and comments on any thoughts that you may have. Let's get these important topics out there and encourage some meaningful, authentic conversations. See you next time. Cheers, and remember, keep smiling.